So it's great to see you. Today we're going to do something a little bit different, and I'm hoping that this opens people up to seeing how their situation might be a good lesson for everybody. That doesn't mean that you necessarily have to have all the details and solutions nailed down. It's that it opens it up for discussion so that the strategies that you are using, other people can either learn from because they're not at that point yet, or they can share experiences they've had that are somewhat similar, and maybe there's lateral learning that can happen. So we become a community and a support group to one another, all right? And so Linda, I've shadowed a lot of the details in Linda's life, because the other thing I want to give people a heads up about is that even though you may be perfectly okay sharing, there can be a post-reveal regret where you feel, even though people don't know who you are, they don't know the actual details of your life situation because I've shadowed them, you feel exposed, and that makes you anxious and makes you feel vulnerable. And so I want people to realize that that can happen. And is that something that would be a residual deficit issue for you? Or is that something that you have the strategies and skills that you can process that? One of the really interesting and very illuminating things that Linda said yesterday, when she and I talked for about an hour and a half, so I could get this information and make sure I understood it from her, was life's like an onion. And there are, like everything else in life, all right, there's good and bad about it. The bad thing is there are an endless layer of onion layers and to peel back. The good thing about life feeling like an onion, and largely being like an onion, is as you peel that layer, it doesn't have to last for very long. You can get really good at peeling the onion. Yes, you are exposed to other events, setbacks, challenges, reminders of your own vulnerability, your own flaws. Welcome to reality and the human race. But you can move on to the next layer. And it doesn't have to be something that sticks and stays with you. And I thought that was a really, really good life lesson that she has learned and is using. I offer that to you on her behalf for whatever positive use you can make of it. So Linda contacted me after last week's podcast, and she laid out the beginning, kind of the summary of her life story. And she did it because she's feeling a sense of not quite desperation, but really strong frustration. She and I talked last night, as I said, for about an hour and a half, and I had probably 35 questions for her. So as we worked our way through that, the positive of her offering this is she's hoping, and I'm hoping, that the participating members today, and we have quite a group, all right, have had, if not exactly the same situations as it relates to a vulnerability to hoard, but they have developed maybe slightly different strategies and skills to help with their similar experiences. And so I'm hoping that people will be willing in the chat part of this podcast that we can share from our own experience. This is not the same as giving advice. This is what happened to me. This is how I dealt with it. these were the positives that came out of it. These are the remaining work that I still have to do. And if anybody has any ideas of what's worked for them, I'm open to you offering it to me, as well as me offering this to Linda. So I really encourage everyone, okay? Everyone has something to add, something to offer. Even if you don't believe you do, you do. If you're here, you do. Everyone to join through the chat line and help us build, thanks to Linda, an effort to renew her motivation, her energy, and her focus, and to help her expand her understanding and appreciation that she's not unusual. There's nothing to be ashamed of, all right? You can't be a part of a group this big, and many, many others who told me they couldn't make it here today because they had conflicts in their schedule. You can't be part of a group that big and be terribly unusual, people, all right? Which does not mean that there aren't life lessons to learn and to apply. And that her peers in this podcast would be happy to offer, as I said, the benefit of their experience without giving advice, okay? Because then Linda can take that away, or each of you can take away the comments and the suggestions that are made, and you can morph it, you can tailor it to building a strategy that meets your unique needs, just as I'm hoping some of the ideas today will be helpful for Linda, and thanks for her generosity to make herself vulnerable. So, I'll give you a short synopsis. Linda is a 68-year-old woman who grew up on a farm. That's key, as many of you realize. Linda comes from a combination of ethnic groups that are known for their hard work, their resourceful enterprise, attention to detail, and stoicism. Did I mention hard work and no-nonsense attitudes? All right, so that is her cultural background. Those are the historical family stories. Those are the ethics. Those are the values. Those are the behaviors. That's what's acknowledged and rewarded in whatever form, or punished in some way, all right? And we all have an ethnic background with family rules and family stories that become part of our identity, positively or as a challenge. Okay, so in addition, there are, as we age, I can attest to that, there are building significant challenges that we can develop. And at 68, Linda reflects that she was the only girl and the oldest child in a family of 5 children. The youngest of her 4 brothers was born disabled when she was 12. So she was partly on her way, like a third of the way to adulthood by the time this beloved brother was born. She struggles, even at 68, she struggles with having created a significantly hoarded living space that she shares with one adult child. Like many of you today joining in, she feels a tremendous sense of frustration and a sense of being overwhelmed, added to that shame that this buildup has occurred, number one, and feels insurmountable, number 2, okay? She has been really successful in very functional, very interesting, very demanding ways in other areas of her life, however. And it kind of confounds her, and it certainly confounded me last night, that to date, she's been unable to manage the buildup that denies her the use of and the serenity to build that serenity into her environment, to be able to invite people in with pride, having a home that she's proud of, gives her peace while living in her home. COVID has only made that worse. So the confounding part for me was, as Linda told me about not just the positive achievements she's had in her life, but also the really significant setbacks that she's had, that she has managed, yes, with love and support from some members of her family and her network, but she's the one who put it together and make it work. That she feels at the same time she's shaming herself and finding herself undermining herself with insecurity. She's not putting that on the table. And so I want that to be a warning bell to everybody listening. All right. One of the things I want you to do before the next podcast is I want you to make a list that you keep at hand. So in your wallet, in your purse, post it on the bathroom mirror that you have to look at every morning. This is not a Pollyanna thing. This is, if you're going to tell yourself the truth, it can't just be the negative truth. If you are still alive, drawing breath today, you have positives and strengths and skills. What are they? What can you acknowledge that there is truth to? And I want you to make a list of those strengths and skills. That's different. All right, those are two different categories. I want you to make a list of those, and I want you to tape it in some really personally visible space so that every night when you go to bed, you brush your teeth, and every morning when you get up and hopefully brush your teeth, you are looking at what your strengths and skills are. So you start and end every day reminding yourself whatever is on the other side of the balance sheet that you're not proud of, this is also true. All right, that will provide a better perspective. COVID is a challenge. It is a challenge because it isolates us. We don't have that ability to draw on each other's energy. And we are social beings as human beings. We need that contact. So we need to find ways to break down that isolation, even though those ways are not our first choice. Second best does not mean not good. It just means there was something else you would have preferred more. So back to Linda. Linda says that growing up with her dad in particular was loving, all right, in a very stoic kind of way, very quiet kind of way, but also his behavior came across as critical. And this undermined her sense of achievement for the hard work, clearly hard work she put into so many things. It never actually got acknowledged or validated. She never got that essential piece we all need from parents, that they're proud of us, all right? And so her mom's response, all right, also coming from a stoic, hardworking, get on with it kind of cultural background and ethic, her mom's response was not to baby her. And while also being a loving, hardworking parent, she didn't provide Linda with a safe emotional space by telling her that's okay and explaining her dad's way of processing things. Instead, her bottom line was, you're just too sensitive. Get over it. Just too sensitive. So the youngest of her brothers, as I said, who was born when Linda was 12, was disabled, born disabled. And due to the overwhelming responsibilities of being a farm wife and mother with 5 children, a child born later in life with a disability, a cognitive and physical disability, you know, a farm wife does not have an easy day with bonbons and TV in the afternoon. She was overwhelmed by all of these responsibilities. And so the caretaking for, we're going to call him Glenn, that's not his name, for her brother Glenn was delegated to Linda. Now, as much as at the age of 12 on, that would be quite a significant responsibility to be responsible for and to take on, it also was a blessing for Linda, she realizes, because engaging in that care was something that she thrived on, all right? Her profession is as a nurse, and so that caretaking, detailed responsibility, that extra level of having to meet Glenn's needs and to help him thrive was part of who she was essentially as a person, and it helped her build those skills. She recognizes that, and she found him as a child and even as an adult a delight, all right, because he was so funny. And there, you know, life on a farm with 5 children, not a high profit margin, strong work ethic is not sort of like Disneyland, a lot of chuckles. It's a lot of hard work with a lot of love probably and a lot of dedication, but stoicism and get on with it and produce is the name of the game. And Glenn was so loving that was a real source of emotional touchstone for her, that she realizes compensated in some ways for what was true but not being overtly demonstrated by her parents, her dedicated parents. And despite his cognitive disability, that was part of why Glenn died earlier in life. But in the meantime, she has lots of memories, very precious memories, of this very, very special person who she had a very, very special relationship with. And that remains something that strengthens her. The other thing that I asked Linda about was, have there been any setbacks in life? And within the last year and a half, Linda has lost 3 significant people. Her mother died a little more than a year ago. Glenn died 6 months before that, so she wasn't over Glenn, that significant loss, when her mother chose to invoke as an assisted end to her life, which, while that was not Linda's belief or Linda's preference, it also provided an opportunity for certainty and for a gentle, respectful end to Mom's life, which was not going to happen given the disease she was dying of. The great thing about Linda is that in retrospect, she can take a negative, what is perceived and experienced as a negative, and she can see the positive in it. That in that 6 weeks, while her mom was waiting for the term to expire of the assisted death, Mom was free. Okay, she was pain-free. She was cognitively more present. She could be the person she essentially was. And Linda got 6 rich weeks, all right, where she realized just how funny and how effervescent her mom was, and what a personality. With all the hard work, all of the responsibility, that wasn't something that Linda got to see a lot of. And so that was a really precious gift to her. And it still brings a smile to her face. And then within 2 months after that, a very close sister-in-law of hers passed away as well. So Linda has had that 1, 2, 3 of traumatic, challenging, negative experiences, setbacks, where, of course, right now, she's sort of on her heels. due to the side effects. And one of the things about grieving is everybody tells you the first year is the difficult one. Actually, I think that the second year is worse, because in the first year, you have the benefit of shock, all right? Yes, everything's a first and everything's sad, but the second year, it's similarly sad. You still feel the loss, but you don't have the shock to buffer you. So be gentle with yourself. Whatever you can do, do. Whatever you can't do, don't make it about your personal inadequacy or a personal failing, all right? That's part of telling yourself the truth. Deal with the truth. Don't go to fear or shame. Go to fact. We deal from facts, all right? Growing up on a farm, money was tight. And even though money is and has remained through the better part of her life a challenge, there's never quite enough. Being a single parent under the conditions she became a single parent also was an additional challenge. And now as a retired person, she ran up a healthy amount of debt, credit card debt, but she's invoked some of her skills and her organizational strategies to be able to set out a plan where she's paid off that debt and she's gotten rid of those credit cards. She still feels the vulnerability, though, to be triggered by things she loves, all right? So one of the other things that can be true if you grew up in a family where money was tight or the ethic of handling money was not generous is that you can develop a, what would I call it? You can develop an ethic, an approach to money that is similar to your family. So they imprint that value, those strategies, those beliefs on you, and you continue to live that way despite your financial reality. Or, as happened to a few of my clients, it becomes something to rebel against. And so when you see things that particularly delight you, or opportunities that you believe are too good to miss, it's an act of rebellion. I didn't have it then, I'm darn well going to have it now, all right? It can go both ways. Which way does it go in your life? Linda knows how it goes in hers. She gets a kick out of managing well, out of being resourceful, out of transferable use for things. That validates her, all right, in her own mind. She thinks that's a clever, resourceful, positive thing to do. If it works for you, good. So long as finding that deal is not something that takes over your life and you lose the view of the big picture. There are too many good deals and you're too good at it, all right? And that becomes the basis for excess buying, excess acquiring. Balance is what we're looking for, all right? Nothing out of proportion. So, moving on. These are the questions that I asked her, okay? Being in your late 60s, I'm wondering what your energy level is. And Linda shared with me physically, emotionally, spiritually. Spiritually, other than self-blame and shame, Linda's in pretty good shape, all right? Physically, however, one of the biggest things is 2 diagnoses that she's been living with since her 30s that have always been a challenge, but as you age, become more of a challenge. And not being able to sleep reliably is also often difficult. And it's difficult because of severe fibromyalgia, which means chronic pain, all right, and bouts of extreme fatigue, and also the side effects of osteoarthritis. You can see how sleep is basic to your life. All right, it's basic to healing. It's basic to living a good life. It's also basic to problem solving. All right, because if you are not getting the REM sleep and the rest, that's the period of time that our body and mind tries to heal us. And if that's disrupted by chronic pain, and such profound fatigue that no amount of sleep or rest can remedy it, that is a side effect that you carry with you starting the next day. So you can see where Linda's situation is somewhat of a double bind. Does that mean she doesn't have to deal with it? No, she has to deal with it because this is the life that she's dealt with. But maybe thinking outside the box and adapted solutions and strategies might be a way to do it. So she's been living with fibromyalgia, severe fibromyalgia, and ever increasing osteoarthritis since her early 30s. In addition to that, at about that time, her marriage broke up and she became a single parent. Now that happens to many people. For Linda, it happened in a very unusual way. Her husband had to take out of town, out of country, business trips from time to time, and completely out of the blue, with no forewarning, no discussion, he just decided not to come back from Europe. And he left her with their home, which she couldn't afford on her own. The debt that the family had accrued, which with two incomes was reasonable and manageable, but not alone on her income, left her with their child and two of his children. And so she had legal problems, she had financial problems, and this is where, in practical terms, the fact that her family loved her intensely and were dedicated to her, this is how they demonstrated it. Her father and her mother and her sister helped her overcome, get through, deal with financially, practically, emotionally, physically, all of those challenges, and they were onerous. You can imagine with someone who questions their self-worth, their self-esteem, all right, their acceptability, their okayness, having your life partner bail on you suddenly with no forewarning. You can imagine what the cost to a person. That would be like gasoline to a match, really. And to acknowledge Linda, and she does acknowledge herself for this, she is pretty proud of herself, and acknowledges that with help, she managed to live through that, overcome it, take care of her child and one of her stepchildren, to parent them and to be a loving support. The other child made a different choice to go with her biological mother. So Linda didn't reject that child. That's the kind of person that's underneath this shame and self-blame, all right? She doesn't feel that right now or at any significant point in her life, other than this marriage breakup, that she suffers with or lives with depression. So I mentioned to Linda, how did your dad demonstrate? Clearly, he demonstrated getting behind you when your marriage broke up, and so did your mother. But I mean, that was much later in life. There was already a story of non-affirmation and validation, overt validation. How did your dad demonstrate that critical part that you remember and feel is part of him. And so she told me about, as the oldest child, she was a really good student. And she would show him the evidence of it, her report cards, her projects, her marks, things she created. And he never said anything positive. He just looked at them, observed them, and didn't comment. And she was so hoping, particularly as the oldest child is generally the most responsible, right? And doesn't have anybody else above her to model on or validate. And so what happened was she felt that it wasn't good enough. Somehow it just didn't cut it, that it was good enough, or the hard work she put into it wasn't enough. And that's part of the message she has carried with her. How many out there right now who are listening to this have had a similar experience, and the meaning that you've applied to the response you've received or not received plays that out in your life? All right. So what she really needed, it made her sad, and it confused her about, what do you have to do to be worthy of your parent being proud of you? We all, as children, as a fundamental piece, a cornerstone of our self-esteem, we all need to be loved and know we're loved, and we all need our parents to be proud of us appropriately, all right? In this day and age, you'll see many, many examples of an overstatement of that. A child brings home a drawing from school, and the validation is like they've just given you the solution for world peace. All right, the validation has to be appropriate for children to learn appropriateness in life. All right, so overdoing it isn't good either. She feels she's lived with feelings of inadequacy, that no matter what she achieved, it couldn't be good enough. So when the setbacks happened, she really questioned her worth. But like the layers of an onion, other life lessons, so her strengths, she drew on some of her strengths. She drew on the love and support of those who responded. Sometimes it's your family, and sometimes it's your chosen family, all right? To peel back that layer of the onion and get to the next layer and get on with living forward, all right? Linda's a good example. She struggles. Yes, she's challenged. Yes, she needs our help, but she's a really good example of how to live forward. Peel back that onion layer and get to the next layer and deal with that. All right. So one of the things that Mom and she shared, because Mom was the other parent, of course, the other source of validation, was that mother-daughter contact, that mother-child contact. Because Linda is quite tall, her mom made all of her clothes. That was something they shared together. Mom teaching her how to sew, how to do crafts, how to be handy. That was part of bonding. All right. And that did help. That mitigated that. What does a person have to do around here to get a little applause that all children feel? All right. When Linda, as an adult, looks back now, which is really a good thing, you know, the lessons we learn as children, we see them through the eyes and the developmental level of children, of ourselves as children. It's a good thing to go back and revisit that. Now, that is not to ignore or reframe abuse. That's not what we're talking about, all right? Or severe neglect. That's not what we're talking about. But it's okay to go back and revisit these childhood experiences with adult awareness. And one of the things as an adult and as a woman who has been a mother herself, she now can appreciate in a way she couldn't as a child, exactly what the responsibilities and the drain on being a farm wife and mother was, particularly one with 5 children, the last of which was born late and was born disabled. She thinks now that for a period of life where she probably felt that mom was not as supportive as she needed to be, given that dad was so stoically not celebrating her successes and achievements, not validating her self-worth and self-esteem, mom was probably dealing with a healthy degree of postpartum depression, okay? And which she found hard to shake. So I asked her, are we not alone in life? Were there other adults, like extended family members, who played an important role and influenced your life? Ask yourself that question. Who got you? In my book, I talk about my father. When I looked in my father's eyes, he didn't have to say a lot. I saw it in his eyes, all right? And he too was military. He was stoic, but he got me, okay? I knew he got me, and I appreciated that. My mom got me, but less so, all right? And who else, though? My grandmother, my father's mother, and my grandfather, my father's father, was profoundly influential in my life, just in little ways on a day-to-day basis when I was privileged enough to share day-to-day experiences with them, to have access to them. And those have remained with me in times when I've been challenged, in times when I question myself. I look up and I pretend I'm looking in their eyes, and I go to my memory, which will never fail me because it's a long-term memory. You can't remember what you had for breakfast when you get old enough, but the long-term memories stay with you, and I see the love and respect and expectations. What's expected of me in a reasonable way. I see that in their eyes, and I ask you to do the same. Could be a teacher. For Linda, one of her important, influential family members, because remember, her family itself was so hardworking and so stoic, they weren't terribly tolerant of emotional feelings, all right? They weren't expressed. But mom had a sister who was quite a bit like Linda, who had an emotional, an ability to live an emotional life as well, and to access emotions, to process things, to be sensitive and compassionate. And so having that person in her life, no, it didn't make up for mom and dad, but it did add the reality that I am not so unusual. There are other people like me. This is not a personal failing or a personal inadequacy that I am so sensitive. Okay, this is a realistic way to be, and that aunt was a real gift to her as well. All right. Linda mentioned unpacking issues. And the way she unpacks issues is using her metaphor of life being like an onion. I recommend and I offer that to you for the use you can make of it out there. All right, that's a good way to look at it. Yes, this is happening, but if I deal with it, rather than let it confound me, I respect the feelings, I respect the side effects of this experience, but it's now. Live forward. Peel the onion. Move on. Move on to the next layer. Move on to now. Move on to now. Don't stay with then. All right? Then is the past. You can't do anything about the past, but you can change the meaning it has for you. You can change the influence and the impact it will have on your life moving forward. If you just keep going, move forward in whatever way you can. All right? We talked about money being tight. Money was particularly tight realistically when her marriage broke up. She owned the home, but She accessed, accepted, she shared, she didn't stay silent in shame, not sharing with her network what the setbacks were, not giving the universe and her network an opportunity to help and assist in any reasonable way they're capable of. All right. She sent it out. She sent that message out, and she accepted the help. She wasn't too proud, and she didn't take accepting that help, even as difficult as that was, she didn't take that as another indicator of inadequacy. Do you do that? Do you ask for the help that you need? And if the first 3 people you ask can't help, do you keep sending it out to the universe by telling your truth? You don't have to overtly ask for help. You just live your truth. You're not so ashamed of it. You don't make it about personal inadequacy and failing. Share your truth. And somewhere, the help may be there, willing and able to help in some even small way. Right. The other thing I asked was how being a single parent affected, because she had a number of situations where money being tight. All right. And so then when money comes in, sometimes it's like, woohoo, party time, because of the deficit, because of the lack of it. All right. When it's available, you go to excess. Okay. That's where that background of money being tight, deprivation, being stoic, a family ethic of hardworking, that's where Linda, rather than forget that, drew on that to move forward and create a healthy enough financial base for herself, so that that doesn't have, even though money is not abundant, that does not have to be an indicator of getting depressed, feeling that you're down, feeling that there's a lack of, that it being a negative. She's made it a neutral. Can you do that by rethinking the meaning that we apply to some apparent setbacks in our life? Can we rethink that and realize, put it in better proportion now? Whatever it was then, it doesn't have to remain that now. We have grown and learned, and we are slightly different people. How can we reframe that to at least making what was a negative a neutral? Right. So we're going to move on beyond money here. You mentioned, Linda, being creative. And I asked her, how do you express yourself creatively? And she gave me a few examples. Like her mom, she really likes to sew, all right? She likes to paint. She really can get lost in detailed work. She loves fine hand coordination and projects that require that attention to fine detail, all right? That's a joy in her life, but she also recognizes that because it's such a joy in her life, it can get out of proportion. It can distract her, derail her, all right? And that's a way to lose focus, use up the energy she has, and not complete the regular work that all of us have to do, all right? And so if I had the opportunity, I would send Linda back to the Conquer the Clutter book, the chapter on setting goals, joy, fun, and play, a little bit every day of each. Reminding yourself through activities that you are a growing, learning, developing human being, and you remain that. And in addition to that, the balance of at least 15 minutes of focused work, just plain old ordinary boring stuff, that's also a fact of life. I asked her about the tools. Sometimes when people have projects, the tools they use become too abundant and chaotically stored. Linda said that that's not an issue for her. Is it an issue for you? So I asked her about what she mentioned, that the doctor's story in the book really struck her the most. And I asked her, what about the doctor's story? And she said, paper. Okay, the problem with paper. And so Linda and I agreed that it would be a really good idea for me to do one whole podcast on dealing with paper. And we will do that together. Okay, so know that that's coming up. It won't be the next thing we deal with. Another real life story that is different from Linda's will be the subject for our next podcast. From your past and the things you excelled at, you as well, everybody listening, is there anything about that achievement, that positive, that also exacted an exponential cost? And for Linda, it was vicarious loss. Linda's job as a nurse meant that not everyone survived. And sometimes in the taking care of people and supporting them through their journey, through health, mental health and physical health, sometimes they don't make it. And that was a repeated thing that Linda had to respect, was part of her process, and find a way not to let it derail her. All right? And certainly not give up something she was so good at. All right, I'm going to move through here. Sorry, folks, I'm just moving through this in the interest of time. Some of the strategies that Linda uses are specific to her, but things like EFT, tapping, she's done a little studying, a little work on, and she finds that a really useful strategy to help her process thoughts and feelings, and I recommend it. It's a well-acknowledged strategy. It involves tapping to create focus, and it prompts that processing and release. All right, it's called EFT. Okay. What other strategies? So acknowledging what you've learned in life, the skills that Linda says that she uses a lot, and this is available for you as well. This is true for you. And are you using it? She pretty much knows herself. The good, the bad, and the neutral, all right? She knows herself. And she doesn't expect herself to be a fundamentally different person. She's not remaking herself. What Linda recognizes she needs some help with is reminding herself of the strengths when her vulnerabilities are triggered. Always work from strength. Dwelling on your vulnerabilities and the things that are negative after you've acknowledged what the problem is are not useful. Work from your strengths to mitigate those, all right? She also has learned what triggers her, and she is at times more successful at avoiding triggers and managing them. And sometimes when she doesn't take good enough care of herself, when she doesn't remind herself that the truth about her and you is there are multiple sides. There's the positive, the strength, and the vulnerabilities, all right? So focusing on the negative just puts you deeper in the hole. Recognizing that you're not the same person every day, and you don't have to be, you shouldn't expect yourself to be the same person every day. Right? So depending on what's happening, the context of your day, your week, your month, your year, all right, particularly in situations like Linda has had with repeated loss over a year and a half, you're going to shift more to the vulnerability side because dealing with it has used up the strengths to some extent. But if you can shift one way, it means that neuroplasticity, that ability to learn from experiences and to take that experience and apply it, means that you can shift up the other way as well. All right? We're not the same people every single day. Fundamentally, we are, but we use our strengths, and sometimes we trip over our vulnerabilities. Get back up. Back up the continuum. Remind yourself of the strengths and deal from strengths. And deal from facts. Never go to fear or shame. That is pointless. Okay? Deal from facts. The good facts, the bad facts, and whatever the balance of those two things is, that today is a truth you need to deal with. All right? She says, I'm a great practitioner of the benefits of a to-do list. All right? That's a great thing. One of the things that I would coach Linda on, a to-do list, I do this every day. Every day, a to-do list, all right? That helps me keep focused. However, it's really important that the to-do list is manageable, all right? So you've got your A, B, and C list. Your things on your A list, they absolutely have to be done by the end of the day, which means it's a very short list, all right? Your B are important. And there is a deadline, and that deadline is coming, but it isn't today. That goes on your B. And your C list are things that, you know what, would be really great if you did do. However, you'll address those when they are important or inconvenient enough to be on the B list and then moved up to the A list. All right? Your to-do list should be in 3 parts. All right? Don't overwhelm yourself with a to-do list. Ticking off things when you have a list this long, all right, is not going to be terribly validating. It's going to be a very short-lived validation for you if the list goes on and you keep adding to it. Okay. I asked her, are there specific things? I want you to go through your list as I go through Linda's list. Are there specific categories of things that you are especially attracted to? And Linda said, she knows. She loves color, okay? Color can grab her. Color can make her forget that this is a vulnerability for a short time. She can really get into color and lose herself. She loves cloth and fabric, okay? Not surprising, given the history that Linda comes from. Not surprising, right? But she loves cloth and fabric, all right? She loves clothes as well. And because her weight goes up and down, like most of us as we age, all right, it's a battle. She regularly has to revisit whether something fits or not and make purchases. Some body types gain and lose weight easily, all right? But what I recommend is we keep the size we are, and we keep enough of one size up and one size down, right? By the time if you keep those 3 categories, you've got room for movement, all right, if your weight is going up and down. Right? And keep them packed, keep your one up, one down, packed away in a labeled tote or labeled boxes. Mine are under my bed. All right. I am a body type that goes up and down in weight. That's reality. And I don't want to hear people give me easy answers for that, because you know what? That's part of my genetic makeup. I'm Irish. That potato thing really catches up with you. So that's reality. Is it truth? No, it's probably not truth, but it is my reality. Right? And so I give myself that truth and I build a strategy around it. So it doesn't mean that everything I've had that was really great from one time I left high school, I keep. All right? There's limits, folks. Okay, even though that's my truth, there are limits. How, if I'm not wearing this thing, this item number 101, all right, if I'm not wearing it, why would I be wearing item 303? Right? There's a limit. Acknowledge that. That's part of the truth as well. She also loves dolls. All right. Some people do. She loves creating miniature representations of things, and where she's vulnerable is when she sees little pieces that could be part of a miniature scenario. It really strongly feels like a good idea to get that while it's gettable. All right. Do you do that? Is there a limit? Do you have, if you know that's a vulnerability and you know you're prone to that, do you have a safety margin of criteria in your mind? One project on the go and one in the works. That's what I would suggest. All right. And just trusting that whatever you see that you think is so unique, you'll never see it again. There are many of it. And sooner or later, something the same or better is going to be available when that's the project that's in the wings. Okay. She loves fabric and a cloth so much that there is so much of it, there is no space to spread out and use it. Can you see where not drawing a limit deprives you of the joy that you had the intent to experience by that thing you're collecting? The more you have, the less you can find. And you don't have to go to the extent of being a minimalist. Okay, if inherently, fundamentally, you are not psychologically a minimalist, nobody's talking about Marie Kondo. Nobody's talking about being that extreme, living in the middle, being exactly who you are, but understanding with the best and the worst, boundaries and limits. All right, just understanding that same reality too for Linda. Getting caught up in the detail. She could lose hours, all right, by getting caught up in the detail. Okay. Are there specific things you already know need to go? All right. We're going to run over just a little, then I'm going to do the questions, but I just want you to know in case you have to be somewhere. So when I was talking to Linda about are there things you need to know, basically what we did was we went through a safety audit, because as soon as Linda started, and the other thing too, it's not just what needs to go, it's what is placed where. Safety first. When Linda started to tell me staircases could be a problem, pathways, access routes were packed with boxes, they were narrow, that led me to say, Linda, we're going to switch our thinking to a harm reduction approach. We're going to do a safety audit. All right, so I would suggest that in that safety audit piece, rather than me going through all the details of this for you right now, that you go back to a former podcast where we did safety audit. All right, and look at that, and then look at how that applies to your environment. Look as well at, is what the volume of what you're keeping, all right, is it costing you the joy that acquiring it, the intent you had when you acquired it? So are you in no man's land, all right, at that point, at this point, all right? And what can you start to do about it now? Okay. So remember the access routes, remember around heat sources. Please go back and do that audit periodically. Okay, we're going to move over to, we have 7 questions. Let's have a look. All right, look here. Maureen says, I love the rain. I love the rain and the wind. I think I was either a sailor or a West Highland White Terrier in a past life. Okay. Pat, I agree the second year of Lost is the most difficult. Be kind to yourself and cherish your memories. The other thing too, one of the things that I learned as I studied neurolinguistic programming, I had a very wise practitioner, Mary McLean, and it was a time of loss in my life. It was the loss in the book in the opening pages of the book that I outlined. One of the things that Mary taught me, and I pass it on to you because it was very, very comforting, was yes, the person themselves can't physically be with you, all right? Whether you have a spiritual belief that they move to a different level, a different accessibility, that they're still with you, just not physically, that's a matter of personal choice. But they never leave you here, all right? The relationship you had and the love and validation and correction and lessons that they taught you, those are alive, and they're alive in you. And how can you continue the things, not just for your life, but in this world? How can you help the people who have to leave through death? How can you help them be part of the future, the present and the future? You can do that by choosing the top 3 qualities that those people lived and embrace those in your own life, all right? And live those qualities, aspire to those qualities, and offer the wonder that was them, all right? The great part that was them. Offer that through your actions. Increase your ability to impact this world by living their top 3 qualities and characteristics. Meredith, I always felt love. However, when reporting that I'd got 98 on the math test, I was asked what happened to the other 2%. The pity of that, Meredith, is that even if that was said, whether seriously or not, all right, even if that was said in jest, the message that a child at that developmental level, whatever developmental level you were at when that was happening, the message is you're not good enough. All right, even though you've put your best into this, your best isn't good enough. I'm not sure that parents meant that when they said it, but that is what they achieved. However, it's also true that every single one of us, the only person who can parent us perfectly is ourself. Our parents are separate people with different values, different feelings, different psychological makeup, different awareness. They can't mind read us. It's our job to pick that piece up and finish it, all right? It's our job to do the repairs on the ways that our parents didn't excel, and not to assume that it was done out of malice or a lack of love for us, unless there's overt proof that that was true, in which case that's the truth we work through. I sent a scenario on behalf of myself and someone else. Also, we indicated our interest in the small groups. Would it be possible to, yes, I have received those, and yes, I'm working on it, and I will communicate with you, Zoe, and the other person within the next week to 10 days, all right? I'm just firming up the details of that support group, okay? Maureen to everyone, I thank God every day or fate for the okay, I walked right into that one, Maureen, for the Wednesday Zoom meeting. I never felt so understood and hopeful. Thanks, Elaine. And today, Linda, if you're with us, thank you for sharing your story. San, Elaine, during another session, would you please address how to best address the negatives we as parents have passed on to our children? Yes, I will. We've shown by our example that we felt with things from a place, I'm sorry, I've lost my place here just for a sec, place of shame or guilt rather than from facts. That's true, Sam. We've all done it. And we've all missed the impact. Some of the things we've inadvertently said or done have left a legacy for our children. No parent is exempt, all right? And yes, I will do. So what you're really talking about is taking responsibility, how to remedy, in whatever ways we can, how to address, how to own, and how to state for our children now what the intent was rather than what the effect was. All right. Okay. Do we have any other questions? I think we're good. Thank you all for joining. If there's anybody who would like to offer their life experience as a story for our next podcast, that would be wonderful. I do have a few requests, but if there's anybody else, please do. And what will happen is that you and I, before the next podcast, will spend about an hour one-on-one. So it's an opportunity for you to get an individual free coaching session as well. I will shadow many of the details in Linda's life. All right. Many of the details in Linda's life have been shadowed in an effort to protect her against what I call this version of buyer's regret. All right. You take care. We'll see you next week. Have a great week.
You too.
Bye now.